Hi, my name is Dessi Popova. I'm the founder of eTeams Consulting Group. Here with me today are Susan and Edina from Prezi. Please introduce yourself, Edina.
Hi, Dessi, and really nice to meet everybody. I'm Edina Nemeth, coming from Prezi, and I'm the assistant to the CEO. And I also have more hats than that because apart from that, I'm also responsible for community facilitating, and also I'm doing CSR coordination.
My name is Susan Setton. I would say that I was the office and facilities manager, but since we've moved in a different situation, I am now the operations and culture manager for the San Francisco office.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you both today. And we're going to talk about, well, company culture. And I have a little bit of an exercise for the two of you. Surprise! I saw Susan's face. Susan, when I tell you the words company culture, what kind of emotion do you have? What kind of words do you associate these two words with?
What would I associate it with? I would say company culture actually comes from motivation. And when I say that, that seems kind of strange, but it's like company culture. What brings us together? What combines us? What's part of the glue in a company setting, regardless of whichever department you're from, what you do for the company? It's like what brings us together, and that's part of the culture. So that's what I would. Well, that's actually not a word so much as a situation of engagement and connection. And so that's what I would kind of formulate as part of culture. So it's not quite a straightforward answer, but it's like culture. What is culture? It's like, oh, well, you can use words, but it's a feeling. At least for me, it is. It's a feeling that you have when you enter a company. What's the vibe? It's like, oh, are we really official? Are we casual? What's the environment like? And what's the mindset? And so that's what I would say that's, to me, is part of culture.
Mm-hmm. And the same question goes to Edina.
My first reaction when you said emotion was that I feel happy and sad at the same time, depending on what type of company culture I imagine immediately. When I think of Prezi's culture, I luckily feel happy, and I really think, that really being honest here, I'm very lucky to work in a place where when this word comes up, I'm rather feeling happy. But I know that, it could go the other way. Um, I was also thinking of sense of belonging as a term. I really liked, Susan, what you said about together or togetherness. Um, and you brought in one more thing about the why we work, how we work, and what we do together. So I think it's kind of the thing that's like present everywhere, in everything. So
Mm-hmm.
like even in your smallest email, company culture is there. If it's not there, then you know that there is some sort of misalignment happening. So for me, it's also this wholeness of a company experience, including the work and including the not so work related things. Everything goes under company culture in my head.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. So, Susan, because you are in a way the heart of company culture for Prezi, naturally you'd associate it with all of this. And then Adina mentioned something very, very interesting, that others would have a good and a bad feeling about it. And every time I ask this question, the majority of people are saying, I have a good and a bad feeling. The good feeling comes from being in a good, positive culture, and the bad feeling comes from being in a bad culture. And so, unfortunately, I have to say that across the digital space, company culture has become a type of buzzword. So many employees are sharing that it's not so much about them as it's about the company. I mean, this is the perception of people who are in a negative environment, or in an environment that is currently struggling with their culture.
Hmm.
And so that's why I like to do this exercise, because this obviously shows you what kind of environment you have. And I knew that Prezi has a certain story, and I would like you here to share a little bit more. Edina and I spoke earlier before we started recording about, well, Prezi, and do you have an office? Don't you have an office? Where's your office? So tell us now a little bit more about that. Is Prezi remote? Is it hybrid? Is it like office based? Where is it?
So, Edina, do you want to start?
Go ahead, Susan. You have been here longer than I am, so you remember more of the steps that we went through. Go ahead.
Well, so I would comment to right now in the sense that when we were much more office based, but right now, since we are talking about a hybrid situation, we are double fold hybrid, because not just if we had a physical office space, people have the option to come in or work remote. So in that capacity, it's hybrid. And we have teams, people within the same team who work remotely or in the office. So that itself is hybrid. But in the situation in this particular case as well, San Francisco is truly, well, I should say the US hub is all remote currently. So we do have a hub, which I operate off of, but then the home base where we kind of have a physical space is in Budapest. So even within a remote situation or a hybrid situation, we have an even further level of hybrid, because in the US, we are all remote.
When Prezi was founded in 2009, it was originally founded in Budapest, and so I think this is our fourth office since. And, Prezi was one of the cultures that was very strongly based on its office spaces.
Yes.
We took a lot of effort into how our offices operate, look like, what we provide for the employees. A lot of perks were connected to it and so on. However, because we already had 4 hubs by the time the pandemic hit, and these 4 hubs were Riga, Berlin, Budapest, and San Francisco, we always had an element to hybrid. For example, I was always working closely with the San Francisco office, so I would spend a lot of time in the digital space already. However, for some of the teams, when the pandemic hit and we all of a sudden needed to leave the offices for, safety, then it was a new situation. And now, as Susan is saying, it's kind of a mixture of things. I think we are going through the transition that many companies are going through. And at this point, we have decided to remain virtual first, so not entirely remote.
Yeah.
And we do keep the hub spaces, for example, in Europe, where you can totally use the advantages of an office space still. However, if you want to, then you can totally use the advantages of the remote work as well. And this helps a lot to some of the colleagues who, for example, in Hungary, some colleagues have decided to move a little further from the capital, for example, and we have been hiring globally for a while now. So we do have company members who are out of these areas where we used to have the hubs. So I think I would say we are changing, and at this point, we still see value in the spaces that we can come together at. However, on a daily basis, I would say we rather work in a hybrid mode, or even more so, a little more towards the remote mode, because, a lot of times I go to the office, but I still have my meetings online. So
Yes.
I am not going to meet the teammates. I'm going for the stable internet, for example, or something along those lines.
And are there other people from the company there? Do you grab coffee with anyone?
Yes, it happens. I mean, what I see in the Budapest office, for example, that the usage of the office really varies throughout the year. So some periods people tend to come in, and if we provide further things, not only the office space. So for example, if there is like a small gathering happening, then all of a sudden people tend to come into the office. However, if not, then the attendance can be very low. It's very, very different. And also, I think we don't have the clear image of it yet, because the COVID regulations in Hungary have been only lifted for very few months. So it's, still this little in and out situation, I think, for every country that we are operating in, that some people are just claiming that for them it's not a COVID safe space because there are too many people, for example. So I have to be honest, I don't know how the office exactly is going to be used. When for example, in Hungary, it is still claimed to be a danger situation by the government. So they could close down the office spaces tomorrow if they wanted. Not likely, but they could. So I have to be honest, I think we are still in the pandemic in that sense, at least in our minds, definitely. And of course, some of the case numbers are also showing that, this is not over. We wish it was over, but it is not entirely over yet.
I understand. And well, let's hope that it's over from the pandemic point of view. But I have another question. How about Prezi before the pandemic? And how did your senior management feel about flexible work? What was the setup back then?
We always had flexible working hours. So ever since we started, and it was really taken seriously. It wasn't like, something that is written on paper, but then everybody expects you to be there from 9 to 12. Never happened, in my experience at least. Not the managers never thought that your presence was your work. They thought that your work, your tasks being ready was your work. However, of course, as the offices were built the way they were, you could see a lot of people hanging out there a lot. So, that was the other case. But yes, I think this type of flexibility has always been there in Prezi's DNA ever since they started. I think it was one of their first rules. Am I right, Susan?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for us, when we actually transitioned during COVID, it wasn't too far of a stretch because we had offices in different time zones. And so, okay, it just meant that a lot more people stretched into the different time zones. And now even across the country, we would be on Zoom versus, we'd be Zooming, or back then it was Skype or Blue Jeans, and we would use those different avenues, but we would communicate with our colleagues across the pond. And now it's like, okay, when we transitioned during COVID, it actually brought everyone to the same level playing field for anyone who was working remotely at the time. Now everyone was communicating in the same fashion. And then when in this space, it was much more deliberate when you're speaking to people. And then it made for occasions when we do have an opportunity to see each other in person for gatherings or whatnot. Here in the US, we try to, at least locally for the San Francisco area, we try to get people together once a month and just to see face to face. And everyone is always, when they show up, is always happy to see one another. Nothing replaces face to face, but thankfully we're in a day and age where video conferencing it's a phone call, and it's so lovely to have that. So, I mean, in some ways it's a little restrictive. We can't see each other. It's a little bit different, but at the same time, we have more capacity and I can see your expression. I can see what's going on in your lives. And as we've experienced earlier, it's like life happens around us regardless of what we're doing. And so now it's, there is a little bit of a crossover of work and personal life, but then at the same time, it humanizes all of us, right? And brings us together as a company as well, at least how we experience it. And for getting together, I make it a point. So in Budapest, while we have a physical office space and people can gather more frequently, here in San Francisco or US based, we make it a point. Well, we schedule a time and we actually do Zoom calls, and people have a one-on-one, just to touch base, and they're equally as lovely. And it just makes the opportunity when we see each other all the more special, because we'll actually be able to hug each other, which I'm looking forward to when we have our company get together here shortly.
Amazing. I mean, this is it. I see so many companies are currently discussing, oh, should we have a hybrid experience? What should we do? And the truth is that we were never born to be digital. So we are amazing at it. And it allows us flexibility, and it allows us to be with our loved ones, and it allows us more personal growth. It allows us to be healthier, but also there are risks. It takes away from our personal life, depending on what kind of boundaries the company has provided for the employees, because the employees cannot do it themselves. They need guidance. But because the topic is company culture, I'd like to ask you, were there any challenges for Prezi when suddenly you had to be absolutely remote and there was no personal connection? How did you guys prepare for this? What are some best practices that you may want to share with our audience?
I think the very first challenge I experienced as someone working in internal communications, that you need to be a lot more explicit in a lot of the communications that you do. That something that used to go without saying doesn't go without saying anymore. And you need to revisit the channels that you're using for certain messages, because there's so much noise, and there used to be a lot of noise before going remote. However, now if I'm only looking at, like for example, we are using Slack, we are using email, we are using Jira, for example. So if you are not finding the best places to talk to the people that you are addressing, then you might just create a lot more noise. And one of the things that we did, for example, seeing this, that we had company all hands, I think every 2 or 3 weeks. Then we made it weekly. This was our first thing. Every Tuesday, there's 30 minutes when the entire company is coming together. It is at a convenient time for everybody. So it's morning time for our San Francisco colleagues, and it's an afternoon time for our Europe team. And there you hear about the most important updates that concern everybody. And it needed to be, put on a more frequent basis, because people needed to check in more often. Where are we going? What are we planning? What's the next project that's coming in? How are we playing the next quarter? I think in the previous setup, you would hear a lot at the water cooler conversations of that. And many more people would feel that they are involved in, just hearing about it. And this changed, because if you are not in a certain channel, if you are not at a certain, the honey post is not written on time, for example, then all of a sudden you feel like, what is happening? Why am I not hearing anything? And, especially in the pandemic, when you felt unsure, I think uncertainty about the world, it was even easier to root those thoughts that if they are not saying it, then they are planning something, which I think in a more personal setup, this kind of trust can be a little easier to find than when I'm only seeing my colleagues throughout the screen.
That's so true. I mean, like, the communication is huge. It's so much more important, and so much more the challenge.
And let me add one more thing. So Prezi launched its new product in 2019, which is called Prezi Video. It's around me as well in this very call. I'm using it. So if I wanted to say hi to you, I could just type it here. And as you see, this is a product for the digital space. And so not only we were experiencing it ourselves, but our customers were experiencing the same challenges. And listening to them, what they said was a challenge for them. I think we could learn a lot from where they are at, why certain things are challenging. So, like, for example, learning a new tool, in the middle of a pandemic. And also, I think a lot of them were sharing the same thoughts that I have been talking about, the trust question, the communication question. And I think the other thing that comes to my mind is, how do you remain authentic online? And this is why I really love, Susan, what you mentioned about humanizing. So as long as we are kind of letting people into our own spaces, and, by default, this is a very humble thing that you do. And I think if you use it wisely, even a communication or a company level communication, then it can go a very long way.
So my next question is a very hot topic at the moment. According to research, 3 out of 4 managers believe that their employees should go back to work, or they could either lose their job or they will actually get paid less. And this is currently going on in many organizations. And I wanted to ask you, how do you think this would impact the company culture?
I don't think we're going to do that here, Prezi, to be perfectly honest. I think that we put enough trust and faith in our employees when we hire them, because we go through a little bit lengthier process in interviews, that when we hire someone, we believe that not only that they're qualified, but they also have the same beliefs that we do. And for us, it's more about, hey, if you can get the job done, it might look a little different than most normal pictures. When I joined the company 10 years ago, it automatically had a completely different vibe and energy than American company. American company, it was really funny because it was like, okay, they were very they're very strict about rules and whatnot and policies and whatnot. And Peter Arvai at the time, he was the CEO, and he goes, you know what? If you need to take time off, you take time off, you take care of yourself. And it had a completely different, relaxed energy. And it made us not feel the angst that you might feel in most companies, where then people are jockeying for how to manage within the system. Mind you, but at the same time, we also have people that probably we end up hiring people who are overachievers, and they put in way too much time, to the point where we have to force people, you need to take time off. You need to take time off. So in that capacity, it's like we're a little bit different. And I would say that the managers feel like, you know, if you can get the job done, take time off and do what you need to do. But this is the job. This is what's expected of you. And so, Edina, you're welcome to pipe in
Let me
on
ask,
that as well.
did I understand it well? So 3 in 4 managers believe that if the employees take time off, then
No.
sorry, then I misunderstood you.
They want them to go into a work.
They want them to go back physically to an office environment, because otherwise they don't get the job done.
Well, no, I mean, there are multiple reasons why managers want that, but the point is, managers are saying, if you don't go back to the office, if you don't want to come back, then you either will experience salary cuts or you're going to lose your job. Like,
okay.
Is that across the industries? Because I have to ask what type of industries, because the type of conversations where I hear that's the case, it's not necessarily tech. It might be in a traditional institutional, like healthcare. You can't get away from that, healthcare, or financial, law, so maybe those are the traditional.
Yep. Companies that actually can accommodate remote work but don't want to. So
I hear you. Okay.
I'm asking you guys, what do you think is going to happen with their company culture if this is the way they try to motivate people to go back?
I think it's a really twisted way of thinking, in my opinion, in the sense like, so if I made remote work possible in the first place, do I have data that it doesn't work, for example? Then why don't I share that data? If I share that data, then I have the clear view of why, and I can give you why I need you back and not put you in the corner saying either you do what I say or there will be consequences. So I rather think I could imagine if there is real data backing up the idea that they need to be back in the office for any reason, then the only way I could imagine it going is that I explain to you. But I also don't. But how should I put that? I find it hard to believe that going back to the office has this many advantages. In the sense, like it could. I understand that there could be companies or even what Susan mentioned, certain areas of business where it is a little different. However, I really do think that one needs to ask themselves, and by this I mean senior management, if it comes from this is how we did it and that's why we need to go back, or if it comes from actual
Performance numbers.
yes, or not only numbers, but like, okay, what am I adding to the office experience, for example? Why do I think that the office existence is much more valuable for this particular company? Like, I think for us, what we see is that bringing people together is crucial. We do plan to do that. However, we are not planning to do it all the time, because I think if your remote work practices work well enough, if you have a good communication style, then actually work and you plan a proper travel budget, then your remote work could work really well. And also, I would assume that there might be reasons why those particular people chose to be remote instead of being in the office. So maybe the other way around could be to ask what is behind this. I think there can be myriads of reasons. Even in our own company, I know so many different personal stories behind why a certain person decides not to use our hub spaces. That I think, if you're being empathetic towards these stories, I'm sure that you can gain more in the end. Or at least this is how we think about it. We definitely are not one of those companies. So in Prezi, we choose to remain virtual first. We choose to give the people the option not to come to offices. And we face the challenges of that, because of course there are. For example, there's also research that there is favoritism towards those who go to the hub spaces. Or there could be. And, for example, we need to do something about that for sure. But that's a different kind of challenge. And I think it's a good one, in the sense like, of course, we want to be a diverse and inclusive company, and we want to be better and better about it day by day. So I think this is also one of the moments when we can honestly look at our practices and we can say, okay, this is what we do amazing, this is what we do well, and this is what we shouldn't be doing, or we should do differently.
Yes.
I gave a very theoretical answer.
Thank you so much for going into detail. And I know your company is not going to be one of these organizations that forces people back. And that is why I invited you now, because it's important to share how can you create a healthy and productive culture outside of an office space. And I mean, I've done it for many years. I mean, since 2009. You've been doing it for how long now? I mean, you actually also started in 2009 because you were already very flexible. You were a global organization. And I often say that if you use a computer to do your job and if the majority of your team members and your staff use a computer to do their job, and if you have multiple offices in different geographical locations, well, hello, you are remote, you're digital first already, because you have these global meetings. And guess what? You also likely have unhealthy digital habits. I mean, your teams, you as an organization, that you could polish. But it takes companies like Prezi and others who learn the hard way to share. Now we can come all together and share what works and what doesn't. And that's why today I wanted to talk to you about culture, company culture, and how we can strengthen it. And I see that if managers are forcing people back into the office, I see it detrimental to their company culture. Because as a parent, the first thing that I started learning was telling your kid no is not going to work. You need to communicate. And, both of you brought very good points that Edina mentioned. Data. We need data. Why do you want people to go back? I mean, incentivize going back, but me telling my child just no and forcing it to do something, it's never worked. And it is also creating a toxic environment in a house. It's the same in the office. So the truth is, there are leaders around the world. They have an understanding that office work is what they want, what works best. It's what their gut tells them, and this is what they want to do. And they lack data to support that, it's better for people. On the other hand, the pandemic, what did it teach us? That we are longing for hugging each other. We were never meant to communicate with each other digitally. In fact, when she was saying, "Oh, I just want to hug someone," I was like, "Well, I want to be hugged too," because I work remotely for in fact, my whole work experience has been remote because I also work in global companies, and so I can relate to that. And there is science that says we are human beings that communicate through touch, body language, seeing your whole body, being able to actually walk in and feel the energy of a room. I mean, it's important and it's beautiful. So oftentimes when a company comes in and tells me we're going hybrid, how are we going to motivate people to come back in? And I think to myself, everyone already is craving it. It's about how you bring people back in. Because if you have, I call it literally toxic digital habits. If you do too many digital meetings, I mean, if you've acquired unhealthy habits from the office and translated them into Zoom or another digital environment, well, you're likely to overwhelm people. And what happens is, well, there is no time for their focused work. So they're thinking, I'm going to commute to the office, have to meet everyone. In the office, it's going to be all about bonding. And when am I going to actually sit down and write that, right? So they're like, I'm terrified of the idea of going back to the office. But we can have another world. And the other world is, if we work on becoming great at collaborating with each other, if we actually recognize the importance of focused work and having time, if we understand that Slack can become like email and phone calls and people at your face on steroids, if we recognize that we should introduce boundaries, then maybe we can have this amazing bonding experience at work that we long for and look forward to experience. And I mean, I've been doing this just for as long as many of your colleagues. And I know people want to go back and hang out with each other, grab lunch, and actually brainstorm together. So this is one thing I wanted to mention. And I brought this question because all this media out there is constantly bombarding people with, no, people are not going to go fully remote because the boss said no. And at the end of the day, I'm like, it sounds like me telling no to my 5-year-old without any reason. And I had to take coaching classes and read books in order to learn how to communicate with my 5-year-old. I think that we all have to do the same to collaborate digitally and even to motivate people to want to go back to the office. So this is one thing I wanted to share with you about this question.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I can relate to so many things you said. So I think, one of the first things that really come to my mind is that Susan mentioned that we are having a company get together soon, actually. And when planning that, the first thing that we asked ourselves was, what is it that we can do only live? So let's make sure that it's not like this could have been a Zoom call, this could have been an email. So maybe if we really look at our practices, as you said, and we define what's so great about being together, let's use that time for that. And even, I'm not saying that, being together should be bonding only. It can be work and bonding, like, I'm not saying that there is no way to have like a fantastic brainstorm session live or something along those lines. However, on a day-to-day basis, I get things done. It could be that maybe my home space is more, calm and inspirational to me. And what I also see is that in our company, I think what we are very lucky with, that our leadership team has been very open-minded, and they revisited their own practices in a lot of senses. For example, our CEO, who I'm assistant to, he posted it when he redesigned his meetings throughout the week. So it was Jim Safransky sharing in a written form that I looked at all my meetings and I decided to go this way. I will cut this meeting. I will have another meeting, not on a weekly, but like bi-weekly basis. I will have this group meet together because I need everybody in the room. I will have these 3 people meet separately because I need them to talk about this topic, and so on. And I think it was a wonderful example for the company how to look at their own calendars, for example, or their own meetings. And the other thing that I really like that we have pulled off recently, that we have a no meeting Wednesday. And that was a very long, prep process for it. We checked in the days, what day it should be. We read a lot of literature. Actually, this is one of the things that I really like about what you said, Dessi, as well, that you are not alone in this. There are tons of materials on the internet even, or you can talk to other companies. You can just reach out and say, hey, how do you do this? How does it work for you? And sometimes you get really good advice. Sometimes all you get is, oh, we are struggling just as much as you do. And I think, sometimes that is also very powerful to hear that you are not in your own head. It's not just you. And that's why, and this is what I see in our customers as well. This is why we love to hear the customer voices when it comes to Prezi Video, for example, that we see these patterns as well emerging on how, for example, I'm talking about meetings here as just as an example, but it could be applied to really anything. What the company culture is consist of. And actually in the beginning we gave very broad definitions of company culture, so it could be technically anything that is work related, I think. So I think if you look at it from that side, that yes, it's a challenge, however it's a good one, I think you can go a very long way.
Yeah. And Susan, would you like to add anything?
I love Edina because she is extremely articulate and very thorough.
Yeah. Yes. And that we are able to connect on these topics. And the reason why we are here together is to share with anyone out there that is even questioning, oh, wow, my boss is telling me to go back to the office or I could lose your job. Well, don't worry. There are many people experiencing it, and you can reach out to companies like Prezi and myself and anyone else and just ask, how do I approach this? And it's all about communication. So through dictatorship, it's not going to work well for absolutely anybody. I mean, it doesn't work with kids, it doesn't work with adults. We need to communicate with each other, and we need to find a common ground. And if we base our decisions just because I said so, it's never going to work for anyone. And I will actually stick a little bit more to the script. In terms of culture, at Prezi, if I were to walk into an office and met someone randomly in one of your hubs and I said, tell me, what's Prezi's culture like? What do you think they're going to answer?
So, one of the things that I would say is like, everyone, and during orientation, when we onboard our employees, everyone's feedback is like, everyone is so nice. Everyone is so helpful. And when and it's not just, oh, in the beginning, so to say, but rather we have friendships that have extended far beyond their time here at Prezi. And we have a lot of Prezi alumni. And so that's why it's like when so part of the culture is like just really like, and it bleeds out into the community as well. And you're saying like, what's culture? It's not just our own personal community, but it should extend beyond the community, within the community as well. So that's why we have relationships, friendships outside that stems from this company. So we've been very fortunate, and people talk about that, the culture here is very special. And we are, like Edina said, we are so fortunate that we've been here. And where you can see is like the number of people that have been here for so long also speaks to the company as well, especially in tech when people rotate in and out pretty frequently. We have a lot of employees that have been here for over 5 years and plus up. And so that's where I would say that culture, I apologize, I got sidebarred. What was the original question?
What would a random employee say if Dessi would?
Oh, what would the random employee say? Like, we have amazing people. That's what it is. We have amazing people, which adds to the culture. The people that come in are their own personality. We're not trying to wash you out. We're not trying to have you drink from the Kool-Aid and become brainwashed and part of it. No, you're already part of the system that believes in the same things that we do, and it amplifies this communal thought of all of the above, our company values. And so they would say like they fit in. And I've had people that come to me and say like, you know what, I can feel like I can really be myself. And we want you to be, because that adds to the fabric of the company, of the culture, which actually makes us stronger, right?
Look, there was a second exercise for you both, and it was with a different word, because I'm very, very passionate about this different word, and the word is community. So if I were to ask you, describe the word community with a few words, which are the first 3 words that come to you, adjectives that you would associate community with? The word community. Not so much thinking, you already have it.
Yeah, I'm thinking of adjectives because I was thinking of nouns first. I'm sorry. I guess this is just how my brain is wired. Warm. Sorry, I think words come to my mind in Hungarian first now, for some reason.
Because it's late.
You're right in the heart.
It is also energetic and community is also tuned. It's like it has the right sound.
Synergized.
Yes.
And what about you, Susan?
An adjective about community. Hmm.
You can also give nouns if you prefer.
Well, about community, it's about engagement and connecting. Um, community is a sense of one where there's no, the idea is that it's not about the self, you know? So,
Well explained. Well explained. I wanted to challenge you a little bit here because I wanted to do it unprepared to just really let you show what it feels like. Because when people talk about company culture, it feels kind of cold. But when we say community, and the reason is
hmm,
because of all the buzz in the digital space about how great our cultures have to be. So employees and people who are working in our organizations and not responsible for the company culture, well, they're more like, it feels like the organization is doing something to set it up so that we're happy. But when we say community, everyone takes responsibility. And I often say that the future is about team communities. It's not about microcultures, but about micro communities. Um, and this is my personal perception about it because throughout the years, obviously, I am a community builder and it's my passion. Um, but also, I just witnessed how people talk about communities. And I heard the two of you before we began recording, during the recording, and in fact, Susan, just a few minutes before, I was like, hold on, let's do this now. And it's just this warmth, as you mentioned. I just saw that. I saw it coming from you. I saw it coming from her. I feel it coming from anyone that says the word community. So if we approach building our teams and cultures as a community, I feel that people are going to be so much more happy and, more importantly, responsible, because then we can say, well, the organization is here, the community is the bridge. I mean the community builder and the community building effort is the bridge that connects everyone as a community. And so I would like to, with this podcast and with this conversation we're having, to start to share my feeling about the future of work, and that it has to do with employee communities and team members rather than employees.
Mhm. I really love your thoughts. Thank you so much for sharing them. And, I love how you say that the culture is usually cold in people's heads and this is something warm. Um, I really think that in building community, and you touched upon that it's kind of everybody's thing. You could have one person, you could have a very dedicated CEO, for example, or you could have, I am a community facilitator, as in my title. However, building community is not just one person, it requires everybody. And in that sense, I think what is really interesting is how in a digital space, because I think it goes back to belonging, it goes back to trust, it goes back to authenticity at the end of the day, how these qualities can be found on a digital space, for example. And, in our own example, I think it's a little special in the sense that, as you mentioned, Prezi has been around since 2019. And in our pre-pandemic years, we put a lot of effort into building these communities, and they were built not only on the professional side of things, which actually are, of course, we are a visual company, for example, that is one of our values, that we believe in visualization. However, it was also a way of behaviors, I think, that we kind of expect from each other. And it was also, this type of trust that was just there, that you are safe enough, for example, to say criticism. You are safe enough to challenge your manager even. And in the virtual space, it still goes on, because the colleagues who have been around, this is what they are representing. And I think this is, the key as well, this kind of continuity of the most important things that worked and we found in the live work together, that actually, if you can, you should really keep them. Not, of course, as much as you need to watch what doesn't work and change that, but what works and is there should remain there. Sorry, I went a little around things, but I managed to go back where I started from.
Yeah, and there's a train in San Francisco area taking a journey during this conversation. I absolutely enjoy speaking with you, both of you. Then I would like to ask about, again, company culture, because this is what everyone is dealing with right now. Oftentimes we have companies coming in and saying something is off with our culture, and we kind of have an idea what's going on, but it would be nice to speak to someone else about it. And how at Prezi do you make sure that you're thriving, because you are a thriving remote and hybrid organization? Is there any system in place that you have to make sure that this type of environment stays alive? I often say that in order for a community to thrive, there should be community heroes. Are there any role models, any tactics you're using to keep everyone engaged? I think it's also another buzzword, but the truth is everyone together in this musketeer kind of environment. This is the kind of vibe I'm getting from the both of you about Prezi. Tell me, what's the secret? Because everyone else wants to know that.
I wouldn't say it's so much of a secret. One of the things that I do feel like adds to it, we try to empower our managers who have teams to participate and engage with their own team at the most important level. These are the people where the rubber meets the road, and this is where they work together. They need to have a tight team. So we encourage people to have those opportunities to engage one another on an online setting. So yes, they do activities online, especially if the teams are scattered all over the place. And so like for the US, it happens at the earlier morning hours so that we can get people from the European teams, and they'll do like anything. And we have some amazing heroes who champion these opportunities and encourage it, and we foster it. Anytime that anyone within the company has a passion, oh, you want to do this? Would you like to do a class and teach other people? Like I'm sure other companies have done this, and we try to do it and remind people there are opportunities to engage other people and to see it's like, hey, within our company, we have other people who share the same interests. And from that level, we try to engage people to have a personal part in supporting each other and encouraging and inspiring each other. And it sounds kind of funny, but no, it really is. It's like, oh my gosh, so-and-so does bread making. We have some amazing bread makers, by the way. We have incredible musicians. And when they get together, they get to have a jam session. So these are the things that connect each other. And and we encourage that, and we tell people there are avenues for that. And our operations team, we provide a platform. It's like, if you need support, how do you need support? What do you need from us? Can we send things to your teams or send reminders or any little thing in order to support the managers, so that the managers know that they are not out on their own. So the managers feel empowered and have a support team as well to make change and be effective. So I'm sure that there are other things that I'm not thinking of, Edina.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying. What you're saying. I think I can only add to it just slightly. I think the word that I would add definitely is appreciation, and appreciate those efforts that go into this. So, I think it's very easy to see like bonus systems based on your actual work, what you achieve, and that's great that you are being, you know, the role model how you do a certain thing in a certain period of time. And I think it's equally important to appreciate those who build the community well, because then if you create those stories about those people, then the others might see, oh, okay, first of all, is this expected of me? Second of all, if it's expected of me, how do I become better? And third, I think what's important, and here I think we work very closely with our HR team together, that you don't need to become someone else to achieve it. It's not about being an extrovert. A host doesn't need to be an extrovert. I think that's like a common misconception that you only can build a community if you are the person with the microphone. A community is built on little things. For example, there was a communication in one of the all hands meetings in the middle of the pandemic coming from our CEO. Please, managers, take the time to ask your people how they are doing. You got the permission from a leader that you have time for this, and not only you have time for this, but please do it. And I think this is just one example. And yes, of course, there are moments when it is truly challenging to keep this community going in a digital space. I'm sure that everybody is feeling that yes, of course, sometimes people, no matter how amazing program you put together, they feel like this is just another hour in front of Zoom. There are those moments, of course. And I think that's why you need to very carefully monitor what's going on. You need to go beyond the work context. These past 2 years, I think, have proved that so many things are happening at the same time, and sometimes they add up. It could be like a certain colleague is affected in their personal lives. It could be that a certain thing happens in one of the countries where we operate, and we need to pay attention to it. Like they have a holiday that others don't have, for example, and so on. So I think the most you can do is to listen first, and then based on that actual understanding, listening, you can act on many levels. I think this is what I would add to what you said, Susan.
Yeah, I absolutely resonate with you. And there's something I want to bring up in terms of culture fit, because how do you determine for culture fit? And before you answer, I want to share a little bit of a story. There was a time that I thought some people really aren't meant to work remotely. And I still think maybe some people, from a psychological, mental point of view, they just wouldn't thrive no matter how hard they tried. But then nowadays, I believe that working remotely is a skill. And yes, there are people that are extroverted and they really need to recharge from other people. There are co-working spaces to join, and I'm one of these people that I'm an ambivert, so I need to have a little bit of both worlds. And so there are co-working spaces so that we can cope with this. Or in an ideal case scenario, it would be a hybrid office. I am absolutely pro hybrid experiences when done right. But I want to ask you about culture fit, because there was a time I used to think not everyone is meant to be, but nowadays, after so many years, after over a decade of working and hiring and leading global teams, I'm thinking, yeah, absolutely, it's a skill. And nowadays, in fact, I'm creating systems and processes about that and empowering people to create boundaries, also to understand something earlier that you mentioned. We don't just go into the office to bond, we actually go and bond, but also do something together work-wise, and we enjoy it with each other. And I have a whole different story about that. I have a whole system in place that is focused on synchronous and asynchronous work done in person and also digitally. So leaving this aside, nowadays I absolutely believe anyone can become productive and happy in a remote setting, because it's a skill like any other. It's acquired. Some people are better naturally, but others can become great. But then again, you have a specific culture in your organization, you have a specific community environment, and not everyone is going to fit in there. Is there a system that you have in place to um, to evaluate if someone is a culture fit? What do you even use this term? Um, what are your thoughts on this?
I have not really heard this term in Prezi. Um, I think it's not really in our vocabulary. Um, I prefer the term culture ed, as in that, we don't want hundreds of the same people. We want individuals who, as Susan said at the beginning, of course, they need to share certain things. Like, for example, our values are important here, of course. Um, but I don't think that there is such a thing as um, there is not like a process checking if you are. I mean, when going through the hiring process, you meet a lot of people, not only the manager, not only the hiring manager or the HR recruiter, but you also meet the team, not just once. And we use assessment days as well, so that we see your collaborative skills and how you react to tasks under pressure. And we do this remotely now entirely. And I think, to be fair, the biggest red flags, if I may say it this way, are coming out in this process. If you start working at Prezi, I think you start seeing how people work together. And that's what you start mimicking, I would say. This is what I say most of the time. So, like, some of our colleagues have gone through extreme length of development since they started at Prezi, and not only professionally sometimes. Some of our colleagues claim that I have never worked at such a safe work environment, and I was automatically thinking that we are like against each other in the team, and then I realized that I'm fighting against nothing, for example. That could be seen, for example, from a first view, that they are not a culture fit. However, they were just socialized differently. So I think here, what I'm saying is that I think we really try to be inclusive to a point where um, it's not really us saying, or at least I haven't ever met, or Susan, please tell me if we have ever had, anyone being, I'm sorry, this is not your place. I don't think this ever occurred in Prezi. I've only seen some people saying, actually after the 2 year of COVID period, that sorry, I tried, I love it, but this is not for me. I need my team to sit around me all day. It has happened. But then it wasn't us asking them, that, hey, this is not for you. It was them saying that this is not what they want. And what I also appreciated, that they shared this openly. They said, this is, who I am. I thought I could do it, but it just doesn't, give me enough at this very point.
We are so aligned. I just want to show you something. It's not staged.
Yeah.
You have to read it the other way.
It says cultural ed.
Mhm.
Really? Oh,
That is so funny.
That is funny. It was here at the bottom of this, I swear. Yeah. So
amazing.
yeah.
Amazing. Everyone brings something unique to the table. And I think if you really take diversity and inclusion seriously, then this is also one of the ways how you need to have different opinions at the table. And yes, I understand that there are things that non-negotiable, in terms of values, in terms of certain things. However, I'd still, be more interested in discussion than going against a certain thing or opinion.
Mm.
Susan, what do you
So I
think?
would say that once upon a time back in the day, culture fit was something that we did talk about and we tried to define it a little bit more. But I think that as we've evolved, absolutely, we realize it's a cultural ad, because we don't want everyone exactly the same, because then it doesn't provide value and there isn't change. And then the other thing would be, I hate it when I lose my train of thought, but the cultural ad part of it. I'm sorry, I totally lost it.
No, but we got the main, we got the main point of what you were saying. It's all about bringing in people to co-create together,
Yeah.
right? And
So okay, so bring that back to point, actually, the co-creating and whatnot in community. Would you say that someone doesn't belong in a community? And so that's where it's like we talk about culture and community is actually kind of the hand in hand, one and the same, and depends on how you view it, but it's in that capacity. And it's like, how we weed people out as far as a cultural fit? It's like, well, it's like, no, if you have the skill set and you're willing to participate with us in this community, we value that and we encourage that, and that's something we want. So in that capacity, it's like, oh, we don't necessarily ex-nay people. It's like, how do we bring people in together and include them? And so while we might have some people, in classic scenario where people talk about is introverts, extroverts, it's just like, how do you bring everyone in? And the thing is, well, as much as we try to respect people if they don't want to, and they can participate in whatever capacity that they choose to, but we always offer the option. So it's always a personal choice. So that's where, I mean, like a cultural fit, it's like, okay, as long as you believe in what you're doing with us, that's a great culture fit and a great culture add, and in whatever capacity you're bringing to the table. So that's how I see it for us.
Yeah.
So in a community environment, sometimes we have community distractors, right? And it can happen very much in a company. And like, this is when the word company culture is a bit vulnerable, when a whole company culture can shaken up and literally disappear overnight through a very bad senior hire, for example. We read so much and we hear so much about how we have a solid foundation and strong structure and everything, but one bad hire sometimes, especially in a senior position, can really shake up everything. Do you know of any situations like that? Okay, in Prezi, not anywhere. What would you do if you actually ended up in a situation like, how would you safeguard even against anything like that? Is it through the values? I'll put it this way. I was speaking recently to someone I work with closely, and she's worked with big tech for many years. And she said, you know what? We can be amazing at recruitment. We can be amazing at bringing in and onboarding someone, but there is no way we would know that someone, for example, is an alcoholic. And that is when your whole company culture can become very weak and non-existent even. What thoughts do you have around this? It's a big one.
It definitely is. And, I think it's a very complex question what you are asking. It's not like something that we will solve in this particular answer. How I see it is that if you have a community where giving feedback and speaking up is uh, an actual functioning thing, then those can be used in these challenging situations for your benefit. So I think I would definitely start with talking to the person first, if possible. And I would expect senior management to do so, kind of. So, like, it's not, of course, a community has everybody. However, senior management has certain ownerships because they are senior management. Um, Also, they need to hear this message. So maybe it's invisible for them, and it's totally visible for everybody else. So I think there needs to be channels how it is possible to give that feedback. If the person doesn't respond or responds not so well to it, then you need to have other ways to make this happen. Um, and I think I'm a big fan of restorative techniques. For example, those can happen when something really bad happens in a community. For example, they use it in criminal cases actually, but it's a very easy. We have never used this at Prezi. I know this from a different background I'm coming from. So, for example, if something terrible happened, let's say that there's something that we need to talk about, then a restorative technique is making every participant sit down and share what they experienced, share what they need to move on, and what they put to the table to move on. And then the group comes to an agreement on what we are doing with this. So I could, for example, imagine that happen if something along those lines would happen. But this is really coming from, I was hired from a theater background, actually, from a participatory theater background. So sometimes I'm really thinking out of the box in a sense when it comes to business challenges. But this I would definitely, so if should this happen at Prezi at any point, I would suggest this to use, for example.
And you again mentioned a very important word. Because when we talk about company culture, somehow the responsibility falls onto the organization and senior management themselves. But when you say community, and you did give it as an example, well, the responsibility is on everyone else. So if there is such a situation, the entire team would be united, would understand that they have an equal responsibility and opportunity to be the change. And so such a situation would be addressed in a whole different way, including probably what you suggested, but together as a group, they would feel more comfortable and they would take the responsibility. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe we need whether it's a different word, it depends on what an organization wants. But to convey that company culture equals, it's not just about group dynamics, it's about group responsibility, just as within a community. Well, these are some of the thoughts that I had. And you also mentioned, I wanted to ask, how do you intentionally promote psychological safety in your workplace? And you kept talking about everyone feels comfortable, they can speak up. This is since the early days of the company. And again, this is a very community-oriented behavior. That's what I recognize it as anyway. But how do you think that your organizational structure, lifestyle, collaboration, everything, how is it different? Imagine Prezi in an office. What do you think would have been different, like if you just had to work from an office all the time?
Well,
This
we
is
had an
really hard
office,
to
so
imagine. Yeah, but at this point, it's hard to imagine.
yes.
I see great value in working in an office. So in a lot of senses, I think a lot of this would be still present. I think working in an office only is what it is stopping you from is to hire the best talent possible. So, for example, yeah, Susan could talk about this more because I think, now in the US, they have a team who is around the country. If we said tomorrow, team, sorry, we are opening an office somewhere, like insert city, and you need to move there to work with us, we would lose some of this amazing talent. That's crystal clear to me. And the same applies, I think, to our European offices here. The percentage is a little different, but so we see that our US team is a little forward in this process. However, I think it would have the same effect. And I do think, that yes, a great office culture can be built. However, if you still have hubs, around the world, the fact how much senior management you have present at one place and how different percentage you have at another place might have an effect on the particular culture that hub has. And I'm not a fan of thinking that you need to create something that connects each. However, every place has its unique things, and you need to be aware of that. I'm not sure I answered your question. A little around it, I think.
Yeah, because you guys are thriving in a very digital environment and global. So you're like, I'm trying to picture it. I'm getting there, but I'm not really. Um, that's like, no, it's good. Susan, what is your opinion? I mean, you in fact started off as an office manager. Um, Going back to an office would mean many more hugs.
You know what? There are a lot more organic things that happen in an office environment, and at the same time, there's opportunity to to be a little bit spontaneous, and so so it can be good and bad. But here in the digital space, like when we reach out to someone, it is much more deliberate. And so, and as far as like company culture, I mean, not every company is the same. There were companies that were never in an office and still have a thriving culture. So it's about what people bring to the table, and when they engage with one another, that's part of the culture. I have former colleagues that went to a company that was completely remote, and they got together quarterly, because there is that part of it, which is still very important to have the face-to-face, but they got together quarterly. And you know what? Their team is super tight. They have relationships. They would communicate regularly, work together digitally, and get together quarterly. So, but it allowed for both. And so as long as, I think that we're all learning that we have to be flexible in this space of digital, and as we're all trying to figure out what the old world, new world, and working in this. And so for going back to when you were saying like, oh, managers, 3 out of 4 managers want people to come back. And it's like, I'm not quite sure where their headspace is at as we're moving forward into a digital age, that even these companies that were brick and mortar are now learning to have to change, because everything is changing. And if you're not going to, times, even retail has gone to a much more digital space. We're losing brick and mortars. I don't know how I feel about that, but then with that change, other new opportunities will come up. So, but it's like, let's be open, let's be flexible. And so that's all part of this conversation. And so our communities and culture will have to be flexible with these changes as well. And as long as and I think we're all learning to do that, and we're getting better at it. And so what it looks like, who knows? It'll be and each company will be a little bit different, and and it's fine. So what might work for us might not work for somebody else, and vice versa.
Very well said, because I was recently talking to someone and we came to the conclusion that it's incredible to have such high expectations of people when in the same family, imagine they are born 2 kids, same parents, same household, same everything, but each kid has a totally different character, and their behavior and even their perceived values are very, very different from one another. And so, to Edina's point, I mean, this is about diversity and inclusion, and well, where we're doing it, where we're interacting with each other and how, I think it's important. But the difficulty comes from whether we are doing it in a healthy way. So treating digital communication collaboration as you treat your body. So naturally having healthy habits, obviously, we're going to be healthier, have mental, physical health, and we'll perform well. Now, if we have unhealthy digital habits, and we are not even aware of those, well, then we're going to be questioning whether working online and remotely is a good thing for us. And I think, in fact, if your team is using a computer the majority of time, if all of your services and products are somewhat digital or can be sold digitally, well, in this case, you're already running a digital organization. And so it's just important to understand how you could do it better. And I think with this kind of conversations, we can actually help many people. And there is a person that I have a sticky thingy there to not forget to mention. His name is Robin Denver. He's professor at Oxford. So he's an anthropologist and evolutionary psychologist. So he spent some time studying people, right? Quite a bit of time. I think he was born in 1947 or something like that. So, excuse me, a long time ago. And so he says that, scientifically speaking, we can only connect up to 150 people, genuinely connect with them. Think about name. Well, I think that I would probably struggle with the 150 names. I would need a significant amount of time. I would need to work at Prezi to get to that extent. But the point is, we can only connect to up to 150 people. So it becomes challenging to have this company culture when you're a large organization. Excuse me. And especially because you have the also micro culture. I mean, the micro communities. Different teams have different ways of doing work, different systems in place, different values. I mean, just let's compare. Marketing department and IT department, very different. So the reason I'm talking about this is that it's challenging for us to connect with many people, and the digital environment is forcing us in a way to be a part of a massive world. Now, I think you guys, how many people do you have on your team?
300.
Okay, so you're already exceeding what he mentioned. What do you think? I mean, are there any, is there any advice you can give? Is there any way that you communicate with your employees through surveys or anything to see how to actually build this bridge between all of them?
Susan, I want you to start.
Yes.
I always tend to start and then speak forever. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah, we definitely do surveys. We do, because we want to know what's going on in people's head. We have individual independent conversations, but that's where from those conversations, we'll put out a survey, both from the team perspective or, company perspective, just to see, put our finger on the pulse. What's going on? What are people's thoughts? How can we make an impact? What's the best way to make an impact? So we do value feedback, absolutely. And we utilize that in order to shape our company culture and decisions we make, because we're only as good as our people, and if our people are happy, that's how we become much more productive. And we're not trying to silo people and make them do things that don't work for them, because it's counterproductive as a company.
And I also think that, in communicating, you need to really define your target groups well. What I mean is that even in a 300 people organization, but in a bigger organizations, maybe, double what I say, you need to know how actually your team is divided into based on certain things. It could be a location. Not only one team is at one location in Prezi's case, for example. It could be what you mentioned, Dessi, through marketing and IT. So it could be different types of work. It could be very different. It's like some people came a certain time ago. Some people started yesterday. So they don't necessarily know the historical part of what you're talking about. So I think if you really, when you do your internal messaging, because I understand that, companies put a lot of effort on the external messaging. Of course, because this is how we sell our products. But internally, we need to be just as careful when sending the messages. Who am I talking to? What do they know? What do I want them to know? And this could be an interactive communication. As Susan mentioned, it could be a Q&A. It could be a survey. It could be a live event. It could be an extra Zoom call where everybody comes together for a longer period of time, and where we, for example, talk strategy. So we reduce the uncertainty around it. And we say, okay, this is what we're planning. Don't worry, this is what you will be working on. I think it is really important to have people who oversee this. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the CEO. There are some, in our case, we are very lucky because Jim has been with the company, our current CEO has been with the company for 6+ years. So he's aware of every little corner of Prezi, really. But I think if it's not the CEO at a certain company, then the CEO needs to listen to those who know it. I'm back to, the listening trope I brought in earlier, that I think the minute you are really willing to listen, that this is step one. This goes before any kind of communication or any kind of interaction. You need to be open to hearing what they say, because they might not say what you want to hear. And, I think that is challenging. It is challenging as a leader, for sure, when you have the best idea and the people are like, maybe this is not what we want. But then I think in every moment when you decide to either go your own way and explain why you chose that, or you listen to what you are hearing, or both, then you become a stronger leader, for instance. So I really think internal communications, willing to listen, help just a lot. Let me just underline this.
And I have a verdict for Prezi. You guys are powered by communities, by people communities, literally. I mean, speaking to you since the beginning, you're exactly what I preach. I always tell organizations, approach your people as a community. Leaders would come and say, well, our culture is dipping. And I go, okay, tell me, what do people say about your culture? How do they feel? What kind of survey or what kind of interaction have you had with them? Well, we did surveys and this and that, but we need your help, right? And I'm like, you need the help of your team. My job is to become the bridge between management and your people and to connect you together. So I always say that, I mean, company culture, there is like a definition of it, It always starts with values, goals, objectives. Now we say your company has a roadmap, it has a team of leaders and employees. And someone has to build this bridge together and help you, grab your hands and walk together toward the objectives and goals. And this is what you guys are doing at Prezi. And I mean, it's absolute pleasure for me to speak with you because we are on the same tune, basically. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. And well, I think I lost my thoughts, so Crystal will cut it out. But there was something I really wanted to say about community. Again, community. I keep talking about that. I guess we're going to have a more normal ending. But the point is, it's been a pleasure talking with both of you because the only reason your company is thriving is that you are literally all about people and not for the sake of being about people.
This is beautifully said. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Yes.
It's from the heart. And I have a definition for community because I was taught to build things online by gamers. And I spent a long time analyzing what is a community. And my definition for a community is built for the people, by the people, with the guidance of an organization. So where the problem with company culture is, in my personal opinion, is the organization takes the whole responsibility and somehow is responsible not only for everything good, but also for all the bad. And these are involved all the people. So that's why I always keep saying, if we teach people to perceive it as a community, it would be a joint effort and responsibility.
We so appreciate this opportunity to actually talk about it. I mean, like we love the culture here. We think we're special, but at the same time, it's like, it's like we have some amazing people that walk through our doors, and we're very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with the people that we do, and the teams that we do. So it's like, that's where it's the fit. It's like, finding your people.
So I think this is a good opportunity to actually mention what kind of roles you currently have open, because there will be probably a lot of people wanting to apply.
Yeah, we are constantly hiring. Please double check prezi.com/jobs. They are always updated. Of course, there are a lot of engineers that we are looking for, and there is actually a people associate, for example. So even our HR team is looking for people, product managers, sales. We are actually hiring quite a bit. So check it out, prezi.com/jobs.
I would be really lucky to work with you guys, with all of you.